Welcome. I'd like to welcome all of you, both Penn Law students, friends of the law school, members of the legal community, to this special Dean's Lecture here at the law school. I don't think I need to tell anybody here that we live in incredibly exciting times. We've seen transformations of our economic system, which have challenged all of us and made us think ever more carefully about how lawyers and the general economy intersect. We've also seen over the last few years a whole new thinking and approach to questions of terrorism, to human rights across the globe, and democracy. All of these issues have been explored in a series of panels, programs here at the law school, and in a whole series of classes to describe what's going on. In many senses, this is the best time, I think, in the last 20, 25 years to be a lawyer, because we're thinking about all of these questions. We're thinking about the future of the society in ways, and lawyers, broadly educated, are clearly going to be among the people who are going to be the leaders in resolving all of these questions. Today, of course, we have somebody who's not only been thinking about all of these issues, but has been in the very front line in confronting some of the most difficult implications of the conflict between human rights, democracy, and terrorism. Chief Justice Chaudhry is clearly somebody known to everybody in this room and across the globe as a defender and advocate of judicial independence, not only on an intellectual level, but on a personal level, and it's been tested in so many different ways. We truly are honored to have him here at the University of Pennsylvania Law School. He's been here as well as at Drexel and at Harvard University, and I can't think of anybody who is in a better position to really talk and think through with us about how we're going to confront all of the issues of terrorism, human rights, and judicial independence going forward. It is not my role, however, this evening to introduce Justice Chaudhry. Anil Kalan, who is a professor at Drexel, who is also on the board of directors of the South Asian Bar Association and has been shepherding the Chief Justice in his trip, is charged with that role. So without further ado, I would like to turn the podium over to Professor Kalan.
Thank you, Dean Fitz, and thank you to all of you for being here, and to the University of Pennsylvania for hosting this event. I'd like to also acknowledge a few other people who are here. We have a number of members of the delegation with the Chief Justice from Pakistan, lawyers who have been involved in the lawyers' movement, and we're very grateful to have you all here. So maybe all you can stand so the rest of the room can acknowledge and see who you are. I'd also like to acknowledge Ryan Hancock, who's here, been very actively involved with the National Lawyers Guild, traveling to Pakistan at the height of the crisis to document a lot of what's been happening there. So thank you, Ryan. Ryan has played an instrumental role in organizing this trip to Philadelphia Legibus. So if we could all just thank Ryan. So it is a great privilege and honor to hear from someone who is a genuine hero in standing up for the rule of law, someone who has stood up for the independence of the judiciary in Pakistan and inspired people in Pakistan and well beyond the borders of Pakistan within our profession. Chief Justice Iftikhar Muhammad Chaudhry was born in 1948 in Balochistan in Pakistan, a year after Pakistan and India achieved their independence. In 1974, he joined the bar and had a general practice, both civil and criminal, for about 15 years. In 1990, he was appointed to the bench, to the High Court of Balochistan, and then in 2000 was elevated to the Supreme Court. In 2005, then President General Pervez Musharraf appointed the Chief Justice to be Chief Justice. Probably didn't quite realize what would happen next. Under the Chief Justice's leadership, the Supreme Court really started to do a lot of things. In addition to a number of administrative reforms, which cleared a large backlog that had developed, the Chief Justice had made the court more accessible to ordinary people, for whom the courts might not have been as accessible before then. But then the court also began to assert its independence in a way that Pakistan really hadn't seen in its history. A couple of the notable cases that came before the court, in one case, the court invalidated the privatization of the Pakistan Steel Mills Corporation, which had been, by all indications, a relatively corrupt bargain, in which finding that the privatization had taken place in indecent haste. And then, perhaps more notably, the court went forward with the investigation into disappearances, which have been growing in numbers since 2001, since the response to the terrorist attacks of 2001. The numbers of people who have gone missing and disappeared in Pakistan has been quite high, and the court made clear that it was going to go forward and demand that the government actually account for what was happening to these people who had gone missing. So then, in March 2007, at that time, General Musharraf decided that he was concerned about the independence that the Supreme Court was showing, and summoned the Chief Justice to Army House to meet with him and other generals in uniform, and demanded that he resign. And then the Chief Justice did a remarkable thing for a judge in Pakistan. He said no. What happened next? The general suspended the Chief Justice, leveled a raft of charges against him, which later proved to be entirely without merit. And that triggered an unprecedented movement of lawyers in Pakistan, inspired by the Chief Justice's example, rallying to oppose his suspension, and eventually a broader movement in civil society opposed to the rule of General Musharraf and in favor of judicial independence and democracy. Some of you will probably recall that the television imagery of the processions, the Chief Justice would travel around to bar associations around the country. And incidentally, I don't think this is very well recognized. He only spoke to bar associations. He maintained at every moment the decorum of a judge. To this moment, he maintains the decorum of a judge. And for that reason, I also must explain that he won't be able to take questions following his address. But when he would travel by road, the ordinary people would rally to see him. A trip from Islamabad to Lahore by road, which would have taken only 5 hours, took 25 hours, as throngs of people would come to see him. So eventually the Supreme Court actually reinstated the Chief Justice, dismissing Musharraf's charges as entirely without merit in July of 2007. But the crisis wasn't over, because the Supreme Court continued to act the way a Supreme Court should, asserting its independence, going forward with the investigation into disappearances, making decisions that were not popular with the regime, ensuring, for example, making clear that opposition leader Nawaz Sharif was permitted to return to Pakistan as a Pakistani citizen. He had that right. And then, of course, most notably, reviewing the eligibility of General Musharraf himself to continue to serve or to serve another term as president. And incidentally, this is a bench, the Chief Justice was not even on this bench, but the court was going forward with that decision. And then when it looked like the decision might not go his way, General Musharraf cracked down. He imposed an extra-constitutional martial law. It's not the first extra-constitutional moment in Pakistan's history, unfortunately. There have been a number in the past, and in the past, the courts have been the handmaidens of the extra-constitutionality, validating the extra-constitutional move, essentially giving a stamp of approval to the coup. This time, for the first time in Pakistan's history, that wasn't the case. a bench of the court that was composed by the Chief Justice suspended the extra-constitutional order of martial law, made clear that it was not valid or that it needed to be reviewed. But nevertheless, General Musharraf, of course, purged the courts of judges who would not swear their allegiance to him and to the new martial law order he imposed. And eventually some 60 judges were removed from their positions and detained under house arrest. Many of them were detained under house arrest, including the Chief Justice. And it's important also to acknowledge that family members, including the Chief Justice's family, were also made great sacrifices during that period as they were subject to detention. The Chief Justice's own children were not permitted to go to school. And so many thousands of lawyers, in addition, including others in this room, were also subject to detention. And the crackdown preceded crackdown on independent media and public protest, which you all probably remember. Now, the people of Pakistan ultimately rejected Musharraf's emergency. This was a dramatic repudiation of General Musharraf, and eventually elections were held, and ultimately Pervez Musharraf was forced to resign. Now, the lawyers' movement, long before this emergency, this so-called emergency, had inspired people around the world. I'm sure many of you recall here over the summer seeing these processions and seeing the protests, and in that light, a number of groups here, and in particular the New York City Bar Association, had decided to honor the Chief Justice for his courageous stand. Last September, I was in New York, and we were hoping that we would be able to honor the Chief Justice in New York that fall. Unfortunately, when the crackdown happened, that became impossible. It would be a little bit difficult to arrange for the Chief Justice's visit while there was concertina wire around his house and he was in detention. So unfortunately, that visit was not able to take place. We are able he has been able to come now, and he was awarded the City Bar's honorary membership on Monday. He has also now received the awards from Harvard, the Harvard Medal of Freedom, and is speaking to bar associations and lawyers in the United States for the next several days. After the 2008 elections, interestingly enough, elections which really carried a mandate that the judges be restored, the Chief Justice was released from house arrest, of course, but he was not reinstated. He still has not fully been reinstated to his position. So we have a certain irony here that the Chief Justice's heroism exhibited heroism in standing up to a military dictator in the name of democracy. With the return of democracy to Pakistan, he remains yet to be reinstated to his position. And of course, we know in our own country's experience how important an independent judiciary is, not simply in standing up to authoritarian military rule, but in a democracy, to ensure that democracy is well functioning. So as lawyers, we don't often get to recognize and honor and hear from true heroes in our profession, real, genuine heroes. And today we do. So it is my distinct privilege, and perhaps the greatest privilege one can have in one's career, to present to you Pakistan's 20th Chief Justice, the Honorable Iftikhar Mohammed Chaudhry.
Mr. Dean, Professor Anil, Mr. Rehan, Law Guild, ladies and gentlemen, I'm thankful to the Dean and his associates for inviting me to this institution, which is undoubtedly a very prestigious institution. And it is my privilege that during my first visit outside my country, I have been invited by the lawyers of the United States and their professors and their deans to the all-renowned institution, including Harvard Law School, where the award of freedom, Medal of the Freedom, has been conferred apparently upon me, but it is for the 1600 million people of the Pakistan who are now fighting war for the rule of law as well as terrorism. I'm thankful to the lawyers, students, scholars, and the media, as well as persons of the civil society of the United States, who have not only supported me, but at the same time, they have supported the movement of the lawyers, which is going on for the last 18 months in our country. The lawyers, without any hesitation, have picked up the challenge for establishing rule of law, for which they have given a lot of sacrifices. But at the same time, when they are getting this support internationally from the general public, from the lawyers, they become more charged and decide to go further with the movement. I'm quite confident that if the support of the lawyers in the civil society continues as in past, the movement in Pakistan is bound to succeed. Topic for discussion with reference to the rule of law and independence of the judiciary in the changing scenario of Pakistan has been selected by me, for which perhaps I was asked to speak on this issue. As I stated that I am extremely touched and overwhelmed by the warmth and enthusiasm of the American people wherever we have been invited. In Pakistan, the judges of the Supreme Court, including myself, who was sacked on 3rd November 2007 by General Pervez Musharraf, have become symbols of an independent judiciary. However, here in the United States, I consider myself to be a humble representative of the people of Pakistan. I represent the thousands of the lawyers who have been fighting for an independent judiciary and the rule of law for over a year. I represent the countless Pakistanis who stood alongside the lawyers and have endured all kinds of atrocities during this period. I represent the brave and valiant reporters and the journalists of the Pakistani media who have also experienced every possible hurdle, including not only risking their life but actually sacrificing their lives because of what they stood for and what they were not prepared to compromise. I have said this before and I say this again, that what I did was something any independent judge who believed in the sanctity of the Constitution and the independence of the judiciary would do. It is extremely unfortunate that such judges should be regarded as heroes. Such judges should be the norm rather than the exception. I, as an individual, or the other judges of the Supreme Court and High Court, who were subsequently sacked, could not have achieved anything without the backing and relentless support of the Pakistani nation. As their representative, I wish to thank you on their behalf for the honor and the respect you have bestowed upon us. I would like to present a brief account of the role of the judiciary in establishing the rule of law in Pakistan. Rule of law and independence of the judiciary are the buzzwords in the contemporary world. The rule of law has become an essential condition or prerequisite for good governance. But in the context of the new democracies such as Pakistan, this principle acquires an added significance. The maintenance of the rule of law through an independent judiciary strengthens democratic institutions and brings about national unity and cohesion. An important lesson from the contemporary world is that the nations that practice rule of law achieve relatively a better system of administration. Such a system enforces the principles of accountability and transparency and guarantees the fundamental rights and freedoms of citizens. The citizens have confidence in the judiciary to safeguard their rights and interests and resolve their conflicts and disputes. The courts comprising of the honest, independent and competent judges dispense justice freely, fairly and impartially. An independent judiciary is a crucial safeguard for foreign investors, local entrepreneurs and the business community for the protection of their capital. A cursory look at the modern world clearly reveals that economic development and social progress is attained by nations who practice the rule of law through an impartial and independent system of administration of justice. Rule of law contributes towards the maintenance of peace, which is an essential requirement for trade, commerce, and flow of foreign investment. Ladies and gentlemen, Pakistan has not been very fortunate and has a checkered history as far as its journey towards achieving truly independent institutions and adhering to the Constitution is concerned. There have been successive constitutional breakdowns when through military intervention the Constitution was abrogated or suspended. Parliament was dissolved and governments dismissed. These extra-constitutional measures were challenged before the Supreme Court, but unfortunately, the rulings generally validated the military action on one ground or another, such as the doctrine of revolutionary legality and the doctrine of necessity. However, these frequent interpretations of the constitutional rule and democratic dispensation have not dampened the spirit of the people who continue to aspire and strive for establishing a civilized system of democratic governance with strong and stable political institution, a viable legal system, and an impartial and independent system of administration of justice. The successive constitution, in particular 1973 constitution, which is the current supreme law, provide for judicial independence. It establishes Pakistan as federation and provides for separation of the powers under a system of checks and balances. The Supreme Court is mandated to act as the final appellate authority and ultimate arbiter to interpret the Constitution, to resolve intergovernmental disputes and decide among citizens or between a citizen and the government. The Supreme Court, therefore, as the apex court in the judicial hierarchy, is the guardian of the Constitution, mandated to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution. Through successive judgments, mostly in the last decades or so, the court has developed new jurisprudence through an appropriate interpretation of the Constitution, providing for the separation of the judiciary from the executive and ensuring institutional, administrative, and decisional independence. The court strengthened the principle of judicial independence by clarifying the criteria for the appointment of the judges, their transfer from one court to another, terms and the condition of the service, and grounds, as well as the procedure for removal. It enabled the best minds to be inducted into the judiciary, and the judges exhibited independence and impartiality. The Supreme Court took major strides towards consolidating judicial independence and attaining public confidence in an administration of justice. This was done through strict adherence to the norms and principles of the Constitution, impartial dispensation of the justice, expeditious disposal of the cases, and clearance of the backlog that had accumulated over the years. The landmark judgments emphasized strict adherence to constitutionalism and rule of law. However, this process was rudely interrupted by the executive onslaught on the judiciary, or rather against the independent-minded judges who refused to submit to any dictation or inducement from the executive. A reference was filed against me on 9th March 2007, and without any legal or constitutional authorization, I was suspended and subjected to maltreatment by the law enforcement agencies. A petition was filed in the Supreme Court, which, after a prolonged hearing, turned down the allegations. The court fined the government for filing false and frivolous charges against me, and I was restored on 20th July 2007 by a full bench of the Supreme Court. Meanwhile, general elections were approaching and important cases were coming up before the Supreme Court, such as contempt proceeding against government functionaries for sending the leader of the political party into forced exile. The leader had returned after a ruling of the Supreme Court that under the Constitution and the law, no citizen can be prevented from returning back to the country. On his arrival, however, the leader was forcefully sent abroad on a chartered flight. Another important case pending before the Supreme Court was a challenge to the candidature of the President to contest again for the office of the President while holding dual office of Chief of Army Staff. A separate bench of the Supreme Court was conducting the proceedings, and the decision was expected in a day or two, whether out of fear or so as to preempt any adverse ruling. On 3rd November 2007, military ruler issued the proclamation of emergency, thereby suspending the operation of the Constitution. The Constitutional Provisions Order was also issued asking judges of the Superior Court to take fresh oath immediately after the PCO was issued, a 7-member bench of the Supreme Court, headed by me, struck it down as being contrary to the Constitution. The Supreme Court ruling clearly restrained the President, the Prime Minister, and other civil and military authorities from administering fresh oath and judges from taking any such oath. The court also constituted a full bench comprising all judges of the Supreme Court to hold further proceeding in this case on the next working day, which was to be Monday, 5th November 207. However, that was not to, and later the same day I and many other judges of the Supreme Court were detained in their houses and not allowed to attend their offices. I was detained for around 5 months, during which not even my family members were allowed to go out. The 3rd November emergency was in fact a coup and was a direct attack on the judiciary. Throughout this period, the bar has been in the forefront and has put up a long and heroic struggle. They have suffered enormous financial losses and have been subjected to beatings, baton charging, stoning, tear gassing, and imprisonment. The bar indeed plays a crucial role in the effective administration of justice and provides useful assistance to the bench in reaching sound conclusions. A vigilant and competent bar helps the courts deliver quality judgments. A strong and committed bar is also indispensable for safeguarding the rights of the citizen and in seeking redress for wrong inflicted upon them or grievances suffered due to high-handedness or maladministration. The stand taken by the bar for the restoration of the judges is also strongly backed by the civil society, media, students, business community, political workers, and every possible section of society. The struggle has been long and hard, but always peaceful. In June 2008, the President of the Supreme Court Bar Association, Iftikhar gave a nationwide call for a long march. Lawyers, students, political workers, civil society members, and basically every strata of the society participated and made their way to the capital Islamabad. Never in the history of our country has such a large number of the people traveled for hundreds of the miles in sweltering heat and gathered in one place peacefully and without a single unpleasant incident or casualty. It was an amazing show of solidarity and strength and a clear message to all concerned as to what the people of Pakistan wanted. The struggle is indeed unique, not only in our history, but perhaps in the legal and constitutional history of the contemporary world. It has now assumed the form of a civil revolution and will go down in history as a decisive movement in the evolution of Pakistan to ensure the supremacy of the Constitution, the independence of the judiciary, and the rule of law as envisioned by the founding father of Constitution. Ladies and gentlemen, people often ask the lawyers when the movement would end, and whether they expect to succeed or not. For them, I wish to say that our country is going through an evolution as well as a silent revolution. Because of this movement, different factions of society have united for a common cause. Because of this movement, people have become aware of important issues and have woken up to the importance of the strong and independent institutions. I salute the American people who are fortunate in that they don't have to fight for basic rights, justice, impartially, rule of law, and other such values, and yet to do not taken them for granted, and can appreciate how difficult the journey in such a struggle can be. I thank all of you for your support and encouragement and for recognizing the gravity and long-term effect of the current judicial crisis in Pakistan. With these words, I take leave, but before that, I would be once again extending my thanks to the Dean, Professor Anil, organizers, and lawyer Rehan on my behalf, on behalf of the Pakistani nation, as well as the delegation who has come along with me, including Mr. Atar Minullah, Zulfikar Nakvi, Arshad Bhagu, Zagam Hussain, and Mr. Lutfullah Sheikh. They and few other persons from the society. They are thankful to all of you for giving us the time and hearing this speech. Thank you very much once again.
Of the Chief Justice of Pakistan and the Dean. Just I'll take a minute because it's very important. This lawyers movement has a very special relationship with Penn University, and we feel very proud of it. When the Chief Justice of Pakistan said no, it produced in Pakistan many heroes. One of the biggest heroes at that time was the president of the Supreme Court Bar Association by the name of Mr. Munir Malik. And Mr. Munir Malik led that movement, took that first step of the silent revolution. On the 12th of May 2007, the Chief Justice of Pakistan was invited by the Sindh High Court Bar. Only 2 days before that, the house of Mr. Munir Malik, which was also in Karachi, was attacked, fired upon. His daughter, who was working on a computer, was saved because she missed the bullets by inches. And the day that the Chief Justice went to Karachi, he, with his delegation, they were detained at the airport, and 50 very precious lives were lost in Karachi on that day. And then on the 3rd of November, our great leader, Munir Malik, was imprisoned. And that great leader was put in solitary confinement. His family was not allowed to meet him. And he was put in a notorious prison of Pakistan. And whatever happened to him, he fell ill. He suffered renal failure. And he almost lost his life. We are proud that his daughter, Sherzad, is a student of the Penn University and is here. And I would want her to come here. Thank you very much. We feel proud of her. We feel proud of the Penn University and the Penn Law School. Thank you.
With the honor of your father,
Your father would be very proud of you. What can I say? This has really been both a stirring talk, an incredible speech. Justice Chaudhry, we are both honored by your words, but just as important, by the history of all that you've done. You really do define the rule of law and the independence of the judiciary at one of the most critical moments, not only in Pakistan, but truly the world. I have to say, when I was listening to your talk, I was looking up at the back of the room. We have the picture looking down upon us of Justice Magaro, who was a graduate of Penn Law School, who sits on the Supreme Court of South Africa, who went through incredible personal loss of safety to rise to that position. And we understand there is in many sense not a better room for you in this law school to give a speech about all that you've done.
Thank you very much.
You were a symbol of law and professional. Thank you all for this coming this evening.
Great honor for me. Thank you very much.